Thank you. That was a very generous and heartfelt introduction. Thank you, Joshua. And thank you all. Jeffrey, thank you. Dennis Kelly, we've traveled many roads together. He's been supporting me since I first ran for District Attorney of San Francisco back in 2004. And Lacey Barnes, congratulations. Thank you all very much. I'm thrilled to be here. I know it's lunchtime, but I have a few things to say. So, you might want to just drink some water and settle in. So let me just start by saying I love teachers. I really do. I do. And educators. I would not be standing here were it not for the work that you all do and the work you represent every day. Many of you have heard the story. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, who was my first grade teacher at Thousand Oaks Elementary School in Berkeley, California. Mrs. Wilson attended my law school graduation. I would not be here were it not for Mrs. Wilson. And when I think about the work and the impact and the influence of teachers on the lives of children, I can think of no more noble and important and significant work, and work that occurs because of a personal commitment to do it. It is not a job. It is a calling. It is something that you do in service often, especially these days, with great sacrifice. And you are raising our leaders. You are raising our future. You are educating our community and our state and our nation. And so I thank you all for the work you do. And so I'm going to talk about two things in particular. But it captures, I think, a lot of what we need to think about in a much broader perspective. And I know there's been a lot of discussion yesterday, today, and tomorrow about it. But I'm going to talk about two things in particular. And one is a focus that I've given my office, the California Department of Justice, on the issue of elementary school students and their attendance or absenteeism from school. And then the other thing I want to talk with you about and share some of the work that we're doing is around the issue of recidivism and what we need to do to be, as I always say, smart on crime. So let me start by talking a little bit about the elementary school truancy issue. So when I was district attorney of San Francisco, and I was elected to 2 terms, so I started in 2004, and then I was in that position until I ran for attorney general. I saw a lot in the criminal justice system. And I'm a career prosecutor, many of you may know. So I have personally prosecuted everything from low-level offenses to homicides. I've stood in courtrooms talking with juries about why there must be serious consequence and accountability when one human being harms another person, kills another person, rapes, child molestation. I've done that work. So during the time I was district attorney, there was a point early in my first term where there were a rash of homicides in San Francisco, and it was a big issue for everybody in a position of leadership. And so there was, of course, the response that was, okay, we need to put more cops on the street. There was the response, what are we doing about being smart around organized gangs and all of that. But, I sat back and I appreciate that was the response, but I really felt that we needed to do a deeper dive and think a little bit more about this. So I asked a member of my staff, do an assessment and tell me, who are our homicide victims who are under the age of 25? And the data came back, and it included the fact that 94% were high school dropouts. And I know you all are not surprised about that. And of course, when we talk about who the victims are, we know the offender population is not very different. 94% high school dropouts. So then I went over to the school district, and I asked the superintendent at the time, I said, what's going on? And she said, Kamala, of the chronically and habitually truant students that we have, and I'll never forget, because Dennis knows this, we have in San Francisco a pretty small population of children in public schools. So of the small population of kids in public schools, 5,400 were chronically and habitually truant, and of that number, 2,400 were elementary school students, who, when we look closer, some were missing 50, 60, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year. And I think we all know a child going without an education is tantamount to a crime. So we decided to address this issue. And we addressed it in a way that was about empowering and supporting the teachers who every day want to be able to educate these children. It is about looking at public policy on this issue and recognizing that when we're talking about these children, these are not just the children of their parents, they're not just the children of the school or the teachers or the school district, they are the children of a community. And so the whole community must take some sense of responsibility around what we all have as a collective responsibility to do, which is make sure that the children get an education. And let's remember, in California, among the many things that make us unique, and I would say special with a certain level of bravado, yes, I say special, we have explicit in our Constitution that education is a right. So we focused on this issue then, and through a collective and community response that was led by educators, it was the community, we improved attendance by 30%. So when I became Attorney General, now as the top cop of the biggest state in the country, I thought, well, we got to deal with it here. And, you know, some people say, well, you know, why would you be doing this? You're the Attorney General. And I said, well, you know what? I just brought back $20 billion from the 5 biggest banks. I know how to multitask. We can do a few things at once. So I commissioned my office to do a report, which we know now is the first report that's been done on a statewide level in California, on the issue of elementary school truancy in California. And we published it last year. And the findings were stark and not surprising. We have many school districts where we have up to a 40% truancy rate for elementary school students. We found that last year, in the 2012-2013 school year, there were over 1 million elementary school students in California that were truant, 250,000 that had missed more than 10% of the school year. We calculated what this meant for your school districts. And last year alone, $1.4 billion did not go to the school districts. The money that otherwise would have gone to reimburse for daily pupil attendance. We looked at the data, which is clear, that if a third grader, and you all know this, I'm preaching to the choir, if a third grader, by the end of third grade, is not at third grade reading level, they will drop off. They don't catch up. And the data is clear, therefore, that that child who is not at third grade reading level by the end of third grade is 4 times likely to be a high school dropout. When you then look at the cost to California annually of high school dropouts, it is over $40 billion a year. When you factor in the associated costs of what is going to impact the criminal justice system, public health systems, social services systems, lost wages, lost taxes, and lost productivity. So when we look at this issue, it is not only an issue about babies who are going without an education. It is also an issue about wasted potential and wasted dollars. So we decided to take this on as your California Department of Justice and do the work of supporting what you want to do every day around getting these kids to school so we can teach them and they can learn. And there was more information that came to my attention, and frankly, I just didn't know. I didn't realize, and you all probably know about the report, that by age 4, A child who grows up in a middle to upper income household, by age 4, goes to school having heard 30 million more words than a child who is growing up in a home that is on public assistance. And we know that's going to play out in the classroom. And that has nothing to do, by the way, of the capacity of that child to learn. These are about disparities. The other issue that has become clear to me as we are doing this work is that there are two, I think, sources there's misinformation and myth in two ways that I think have informed public policy around children in need. And the first is a society that, for the most part, tends to be a bit paternalistic around that child in need. And so when we learn about a child in need, we have a knee-jerk reaction to wag our finger and say it must be those parents. And the second, a myth that assumes that children are resilient, when in fact we know they are not. And I would suggest that we have got to be, as a society, supporting the work that you all are doing every day, knowing that if we inform public policy around children in need with the more accurate information, such as understanding that the vast majority of parents have a natural desire to parent their children well, but not necessarily the resources or the skills. So when we're talking about public policy around that child in need, let us think about then helping that child in the context of that child's family and supporting the work that they want naturally to do so that their child can grow up to be the next Attorney General of California. To do that will, I think, be much smarter. And if we're going to approach then public policy around our children in that way, we've got to support our teachers. We have to recognize that without the tools and the skills that you rightly want to support your natural desire to help educate our children, we can't collectively as a community and a society get the job done and fulfill the promise in the Constitution of California. So we are working together on this, and in particular, what we are doing out of my office is focusing on what we can do through collaboration with you, your members, with school districts, and with the legislature in terms of fixing some of what we think is broken about the way the rules are working in California. And so we have, and I'm going to talk specifically about one thing, we have a collection of bills, 5 in particular, that are in Sacramento right now, that are designed to support what we rightly did coming out of Prop 30 and what we rightly did around the creation of the local control funding formula. So the local control funding formula, as many of you know, it requires schools to prioritize truancy and absenteeism. Well, one of the things that we realized when we did this study is that California is one of 4 states in the United States that does not keep statewide data on elementary school truancy. It just doesn't. And so, okay, we all know we are not going to be surprised by the fact that it's not being done. We're not going to say, well, if it was supposed to be done, it would be done. We know that's not true all the time. So we want to fix that. We want to also do the work of supporting what we've heard back consistently from teachers and from educators, that SARB as a construct works, or some version of it. So let's have it in all the school districts, knowing that we don't want to have a system that punishes the parents or the students because of absenteeism without first asking the question about why is the child not in class, and then addressing their need, doing the work of supporting healthy kids, healthy minds, and understanding that the data is clear. A whole lot of these kids are not in school because of asthma, because of dental needs. I was talking with the Association of Dentists that their data is clear, right? Something, that old nursery rhyme about the pea and the princess and the mattresses and all that. Poor thing, these babies have one tooth that's causing them that pain. That could be the reason that is numbing so that they cannot go to school that day and learn. We have to address these issues, and that's why I am in full support of healthy kids, healthy minds, understanding we need to have nurses in our classrooms. We need to have mental health professionals at the school and available, and of course, we need librarians. So this is the work that we are doing. And it's about requiring also one of the bills, and this is the one that's being SB 1107, sponsored by Senator Monning, is going to require that the report on elementary school truancy be an annual report. Because, you know, what I've said to my staff and my team, I don't want it to be a function of the fact that I happen to be sitting in this chair right now, that we're doing this work. Every year, my office is mandated to do crime reports. Every year, my office is mandated to do all kinds of reports. Well, you know, we need to institutionalize in every department, I believe, a priority around our children and taking it seriously and supporting the work that you all need to do. It should not just fall on the backs and the shoulders of our teachers to educate our children. We should all be in it together supporting the work that you do. So we're doing that. We're talking about a bill that will modernize truancy tracking. We are going to also talk about what we need to do to require that we complete the enhanced annual reports and take into account, as the local control funding formula requires, that we ask the question, is this child an English as a second language learner? Let's ask the question, how many of our children are in the district are in foster care? And then take seriously the needs that they have and recognize, again, let's inform all of this with an appreciation that these children are capable of doing anything if we support what you need to do to educate them. So we're doing that. And then the other thing that I have to tell you that is part of our approach is this back to this whole piece about third grade reading. I mean, I kind of knew about it, but when I started to read all of the information about it, it was really shocking that if the child by the end of third grade is not at reading level, they'll drop off. Seeing that people make predictions about what's going to end up in the criminal justice system based on the numbers of our children who have completed third grade. And back to the point about an assumption that has to be made, a more accurate assumption about who the parents are. We have to help our young parents, our parents whatever age, know that they have to get that child through at least the end of third grade. I'm almost at a point, and I've been speaking at churches and everywhere else, I'm almost at a point of engaging in a public education campaign that says to parents, listen, so the baby is born. Your only job is to get them through the end of third grade. Then you can give them away. You can give them away. And of course I'm joking because I actually believe if they put in place everything we need to do just to complete that goal, if they put it in place to complete that goal, the mold will be set and we'll be okay. But let's just tell them all you have to do is get them through third grade. You don't have to get them through high school, college, nothing else, just third grade. So that's our public education campaign. And so then I want to talk a little bit about, again, all of this being in connection with the fact that there is a very direct connection between public education and public safety, right? So, you know, I have this saying, we need to be smart on crime. I wrote a book, the title is Smart on Crime, and it's informed by my belief, again, as a career prosecutor, that we have presented a false choice, which suggests that on criminal justice policy, you are either soft on crime or you are tough on crime, instead of asking, are we smart on crime? And by being smart then, appreciating what the public health model, tested and true, taught us about epidemics, health epidemic. It is undisputed. The best, smartest, most effective, and cost-efficient way to address it is through prevention. If the sniffles take on, then early intervention. But if we're at the point of dealing with it in the emergency room or the prison system, it is far too late and much too expensive. So let's look back again at that data about the fact that, and this is part of the report and our findings, let's look at the fact that if you improve graduation rates by 10% in California, you will reduce violent crime by 20%. The data is clear. That is the equivalent, if you consider violent crime to be homicides, that is the equivalent of preventing 500 homicides a year in California. There's a direct connection. You look at the fact that nationally, 82% of the prisoners in the prisons in the United States are high school dropouts. You look at the fact that of all African American men who are high school dropouts and between the age of 30 and 34, 2/3 are likely to be incarcerated, have been incarcerated, or dead. These numbers are without dispute. So we have to address this in a way that is smart, because we certainly create as a priority always, and let's talk about the myths. We say that we care about education, but not so much the education of other people's children. But I'm like a person focus group as somebody who is elected and stands in living rooms talking to people if I'm campaigning for myself or other people. And I will tell you, at least on the top 5 list of people's concerns is always their personal safety, but not so much the education of other people's children. We have to help people understand the connections because they're very direct and very real. So with that, one of the other things that we have been addressing as your California Department of Justice is we created last year a new division of the California Department of Justice, which I have given the name, the Division on Recidivism, Reduction, and Reentry. And we are in this era of realignment, but we would have done it before. I'm telling you, I wrote this book 5 years ago. We are doing the work of highlighting best practices and encouraging that each of the 58 counties of California will focus on low-level offenders and do everything that has been proven to work to reduce the likelihood that they will reoffend. So there was an initiative that I created when I was DA of San Francisco called Back on Track, and that's the model that we are working from as a working model for what we can be doing around the state. And I'm going to talk with you about it because I need your support. So one of the things that we did when we created Back on Track, and frankly, I'll just tell you, I pulled out a yellow pad because this is the nice thing about being elected. You can do things without asking anybody permission. I said, we're going to create this program. And so I decided, okay, what's the offender population we're going to focus on? And I thought, well, let's do the 18 through 24-year-old. Why? Well, because when I was at Howard University, we were all in college, 18 through 24, and we were called college kids. But when you are in the system and you've turned 18, you are considered an adult, period, without any regard to the fact that that is the very phase of life in which we have invested billions of dollars in this world in those places called colleges and universities, knowing that's the prime phase of life during which we mold and shape someone to become a productive adult. And let's also recognize age is more than a chronological fact. 18 through 24 is a very specific phase of life. What do we know about that phase of life, among other things? They are stupid. That's why we put them in dormitories with the resident assistant. They don't make good decisions. Their brains are ripe for development, but they make really bad decisions sometimes. So we decided to focus on the 18 through 24-year-old, low-level offender. And what was it about? It was about working with the community colleges. I talked to Joanne Waddell recently about this. It's about working with our educators, working with those folks who can focus on the fact that a lot of them are young parents, and so let's support them with the skills they need to parent their children. Let's look at the fact that they need employable skills. Let's do the work of wrapping around with this population so we can guarantee, because we can, that they won't reoffend. When we ran this initiative, when I was DA, we reduced the reoffense rate for that population from 54% to less than 10%. And we can do it. we can do it again. So this is why we created this new division of the California Department of Justice, which I'm told and believe is one of the only of a state Department of Justice in the country. So we have decided to make Los Angeles our pilot. And we are working now with the Superior Court, with the DA's office, with faith-based, with everybody, because it's going to take a whole community response to focus on this population and what they need. And I know we can make it work here. And I know when we make it work here, I was just talking to Randy before she took off. When we make it work here, folks, we can make it work anywhere. We can make it work anywhere. And so it's going to be about working together, addressing the fact that so many, especially if they're young parents, if we can help them and support them in educating their children, they're going to feel a lot better about themselves and want to be productive and more productive. It's going to be about doing the work that we did before. Let me tell you, one of the things that we did is I called up the Department of Child Support. I said, you know, so many of the young men are fathers, and they're not married to mom, and they're not paying child support. So we got creative. And I said to the Department of Child Support, the director, let's figure this out. And we came up with a plan. If mom agrees, we will erase the arrears dad owes and then put him on a payment schedule he can afford because now he's getting a job. Let me tell you, when we did this program before, every one of the mothers agreed. Because that mother wants that father to be involved in that child's life. And you know what ended up happening? Dad is now paying his child support. His chin is up, his shoulders are back. He's getting more engaged in parenting that child. It's the work of knowing and understanding who the folks are that we are dealing with, and again, understanding their capacity. The beauty of human nature, I believe, based on experience, is that when you set the bar high, people naturally want to jump for it, if you give them the skills and the support to do it. You set the bar low, and they will know you don't expect much from them, and they will also then act accordingly. So I'm going to close my comments by saying a couple of things. Again, thank you. I also recognize, you know, I walk into the meetings of like the National Association of Attorneys General. I walked into my first meeting, National Association of Attorneys General, NAG. Somebody didn't think that through very well. But when I walked into my first meeting of that association, it was very clear to me that that old adage remains true. So goes California, goes the rest of this country. We know that when we had to fight back on folks coming in and trying to challenge our ability to engage in collective bargaining, right? We know that folks believe that if they can penetrate this state on something like that, it can happen anywhere, so we fought back against it. But we also know in the affirmative that the country still looks very much to us and at us to see what change looks like, to see what is possible and what can be unburdened by what has been. And that is about being a leader in terms of having vision. It is about a leader in terms of knowing how we can go and progress. The only way we will stay true to that, and I know we will, is by making sure we prioritize the education of our children. And that is going to be about supporting the work that educators need and want and have been charged and have taken a personal oath to do every day. So I thank you all for the work you do. And I know our future is bright, but I know that it is not going to come easily in terms of the challenges we have and what we must do to rise to meet them. But this is a group, and these are individuals in this room who have always stood up to the challenge. And so I say, let's keep marching forward, and we will get this job done and done together. Thank you.